Hi everyone, it's David Radcliffe here. I hope you can hear me okay. If you have any issues, please type me a little note in the chat window. I'll do my best to keep an eye on that. It's on my screen here. I don't think you have it on your screen, but give me a little note and I'll do my best to respond. We're going to go through one of my favorite little subjects today. The 5 ITSM projects you should start doing tomorrow morning. So tomorrow, for all of us, unless you're way off in the Far East right now and it's already tomorrow, it's Friday and it's the end of the week. And you might think, well, I don't have to start tomorrow. I'll start next week. You could actually you really could start these projects tomorrow. There's something special about these projects. They're all projects which do not require any significant resources. In fact, it's mainly just going to be you. I think the very last one asks you to, or I'll be asking you to socialize and get involved with a few of your co-workers and host a meeting. But apart from that, everything else in the meantime, the first 4, are all projects you can do yourself. That means you're probably not going to need to get anyone's approval. And, you know, it's not going to need a big budget. There's not really much of a budget at all. In fact, I don't talk about budgets for any of these projects. And the good news is every single thing I'm going to talk about today will start delivering some positive, worthwhile, valuable results immediately. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? Well, let's see. Let's find out. I've got these 5 projects. I'll use the word project so far. They're really activities, they're things, they're changes in behavior and things that you can do. It's a bit grand to call them projects, but hey, hopefully we know what we mean by a project. And as I go through them, you'll relate to them. You'll follow them, you'll understand. And hopefully you'll agree with me that these will deliver some positive results pretty quickly. So my agenda really is quite straightforward in the next few minutes. It's just to explain to you why I think this is worth talking about. What are the 5 projects themselves? And I always like to end, every talk I give, I always like to end by saying, you know, here's how you can get moving tomorrow with this. I'm going to inspire you to action. It's not good enough for you to be sitting here if you're in the Eastern time zone like I am, eating your lunch and listening in and thinking, oh, well, that was a pleasant way to spend an hour. No, I've got to motivate you. I've got to inspire you to take some action with these new ideas. At Pink, we're all about turning knowledge into results, giving you some knowledge that you can actually use and do something with. So to help you even more, I'm going to hold your hand right through to the end and then say, here's the next steps. Here's what you can start doing first thing tomorrow to make these projects real and get some benefit. So at the end, that's what I'm going to talk about. So why are these projects that I'm going to discuss with you worth doing? Well, here's some of the observations I've made over recent years when I talk to managers in IT service management. I believe we don't question some of what we do enough. We've got to be asking the question why more often, almost to the point of being a nuisance. If you've never seen that clip from Louis C.K., the American comedian who has a sitcom, I'd urge you to YouTube Louis C.K. and maybe don't do it right now, but do it later. I should add that to the next steps. And the little clip where he's having breakfast with his daughter and she keeps asking him the question, why? He gives her a quick answer and she says, but why? And then he gives her another explanation. She says, but why? And it's quite funny, but at the same time, within a couple of minutes, the whole series of why questions gets really to the root of the issue. You can't just wave away, especially a little kid, with something that will satisfy their curiosity. When you've got a smart kid like he has, she keeps asking the question why, and she doesn't give up until she gets a meaningful answer. And so while I don't want you to be a pest and I don't want you to turn meetings into comedy sketches, I think we've got to be asking the question why a lot more. And really, this comes down to one of the projects, which is all about justifying the work we do against the business needs. We'll get to that in a second. We don't connect dots enough. Connecting dots means seeing the relationship between different things, whether they're results, whether they're actions, whether they're news that we hear, whatever we become exposed to at work. Do we connect things together and see relationships? I don't think we do enough of that. I think we have this reputation of operating in silos, and it's very tunnel vision kind of thinking, and we don't look at the wider view and connect things together. So one of my projects is going to be about this. I've said for a while now, the last few years, and many of my talks, that I think we could do with a bit of a boost in the quality of leadership in IT. It's not so much me saying we're all incompetent, but I think when we talk about leadership, we're talking about making sure everyone understands what we're doing and why. And we all have a role in stepping forward here, and I'll talk about this. It's not just the leader who needs to be criticized here, it's all of us. I'll explain why in a few minutes. We measure things up the wazoo in IT, and we fail to link measurements and reports to the business needs. What is valuable? What is useful? I'll talk about that. And when I say time is wasted, it's easy to say that. Time's the most valuable commodity we have. And when I say time is wasted, how that happens is I think we procrastinate too much because of the huge amount of data we have. And despite the fact we have a huge amount of data and information through our reporting and our metrics, is we're constantly looking for even more. It's almost like the appetite keeps feeding itself. And we're always looking for the perfect solution or the perfect last piece of data which will support our arguments or our plans. And in the meantime, time's wasted. So I'll explain what kind of project we can do to help address that also. So this is why I came up with these 5 projects. And each one of them is going to be introduced by a little quote from someone who hopefully we should recognize. This gentleman, Peter Drucker, said, "Management by objective works if you know your objectives." The problem is, 90% of the time, we don't know our objectives. Well, you know what? I've been traveling around the world the last few years, and especially in the last couple of years when I've been delivering the IT Leadership Masterclass workshop that we do, other sessions I present at various industry events. I've been asking this question of the audience, people just like you, and I've said, do you know your business objectives? Do you know what your business objectives are this year? And rarely do I get an answer that comes close. In fact, one time in Singapore over a year ago, I got a lady in the audience who nailed it right out of the box. She immediately put up her hand and she recounted the objectives of her business. That's really the only time I've had that quality of response to this question. Most of the time I get people who hope someone else is going to answer the question because they don't know, or they think they know their objectives, but they're mistaken. And what I mean by that is, for example, I remember one gentleman said, yes, our business objective is to be the first choice health care provider. And I said, well, that's good. I'm glad that you've got a vision there. That's what your vision is. It's not your objective this year. Objectives are measurable targets that you have for specific things which you're going to do within a particular time frame. It's much more drilled down than the vision of being the best or the number one or improving. You've got to start describing it in terms of measurable targets, etc. And every business has annual business objectives. When I say every business, anything beyond a mom and pop shop, anything that's medium to large size, especially the Fortune, 500 and the big government departments, which I'm guessing is most of the organizations you work with right now, you will have published business objectives each year. We still all work to annual planning cycles, and your objectives will change next year. In fact, some of you will be discussing, or some of the senior people in your organizations right now will be discussing and deciding on objectives for the next year. If you work to a fiscal year, that's the same as a calendar year, the way we do it, Pink. We're doing it here as well. And so typical business objectives are around things like growth, number of customers, amount of revenue, amount of cost, amount of profitability, things like that, which are measurable. Occasionally, they'll also be around things like big, major strategic projects, like maybe launch a new product range, maybe enter a new market, maybe implement an important new facility or system, like maybe if you're in manufacturing, a factory or a relocation. That's the sort of thing that your business sets as an objective. Other things around, vision and mission, which is how you go about realizing your vision, those are not your objectives. And it's strange that in this current climate, when we're all under so much scrutiny, a lot of line managers in IT, and I suspect elsewhere, either lose track or forget about the business objectives. I'm sure you were all told what those objectives were at the beginning of the financial year. And if you can't remember what they were, or now, because of my prompting, the clouds beginning to disappear and you're beginning to remember what they were or what they are, great. If not, it's not too difficult to go find out. So this is my project number one. You can do this on your own right away. Even today, you don't have to wait till tomorrow morning. Find out your business objectives and priorities. As I said, they're going to be typically around things like revenue, profitability, growth, market share, whatever. An organization usually has a handful, 5 or 6. If you're not sure where they are, if there wasn't a presentation given or an annual report published, there would have been, maybe you didn't see it. For most organizations, this is public knowledge. Certainly not-for-profits like to talk about this because they need to justify the fundraising that they get. Public companies need to let their shareholders know what they're planning to do. It's public knowledge. Government departments have budgets to work to, and they have plans, and usually they're pretty good at this. You might find this is on your corporate website. You might find it was given in a presentation at the beginning of the year. If it's not readily to hand, you should be able to go and ask 1 or 2 people who you know in your organization will be able to answer this question. Now, why is this important? Because if you know your business objectives and what the priorities are, then it makes your decision-making and your planning clearer when you're looking for relevance, looking for what does the business need from us in IT. And when you're making decisions through the year, you can have greater confidence that the decision you're making or what you're thinking about actually is relevant, is going to add some value. It can help you when you're making relative priorities and decisions around all the stuff on your desk right now. When things go wrong and out of order situations occur, and maybe you're juggling with 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of them, relating each of those to business objectives will help you to decide where to put the most effort soonest. So finding your business objectives is my project number 1 for you. Once you find that out, talk about it. Socialize it with your coworkers, with your team members, whether you have people reporting to you or whether you just have peers you deal with. As you're deciding plans and what you're going to do, what you need to do, bring up the idea of, well, that directly supports that business objective, that indirectly, but it still does support and enable that business objective. Make sure everyone's on the same page. We all have a common understanding. So, as you get through the year, things will change. Your priorities will change. Sometimes business objectives change, especially when something disruptive happens, like a major recession kicks in, or heaven forbid, a natural disaster, depending on what type of business you're in. Just think back to the news items, major news items the last few years. Businesses are impacted by external forces, and sometimes the objectives and the priorities do change, and you have to change accordingly. So there you go. That's project number 1. Project number 2 does relate to this, and here we've got this guy we probably all recognize, and that's his name in the bottom right corner anyway. And he used to say, had lots of clever quotes, and he said, however beautiful the strategy, you should occasionally look at the results. What he means is you might have a fantastic plan and you're steaming ahead doing lots of interesting, apparently useful work, but until you look at the results and, of course, compare them to what your needs are, what the business needs are, you might be up for a rude awakening. So our objective here is to take the knowledge you have now of business objectives and do a double check against the projects you have on the go right now, the ones you're already working on, the ones that you're going to be planning or they're at earlier stages, embryonic stages right now, and make sure they're relevant. So the key word here near the top is relevancy. We want to make sure that what we're working on and the decisions and the priorities we're deciding upon are relevant to what the business needs are. So make sure you know your business objectives and check the work that you're doing right now. So I've said this is a project. You can see already these 2 projects just involve you doing something, going and finding something out, and then using that knowledge of business objectives to validate the work you and your team are working on right now. And as you go forward with your plans, as they change, you will be able to have greater confidence that the decisions you're making and the work you're completing has value. If not, maybe you need to reconsider what you've got on your plate right now. And, it wouldn't be a bad thing if you looked at the work you have right now on your plate and that you're putting a lot of effort into, and suddenly think to yourself, you know what? Why are we doing this? Is it really going to deliver the value we need, or is it really going to deliver some value compared to this activity, this project over here? And you might find that you start changing your thinking. But because you validated your business objectives, that change in thinking is going to be correct. There's no shame in realizing what you've been working on isn't as important as you thought it was. And as a human nature thing, we do attach interest and passion to work and projects that we find interesting. Sometimes we think things are self-evident, and we steam ahead with something when really, when you look at the cold light of day, maybe that project isn't as valuable, isn't as worthwhile, doesn't justify the effort we're putting in. So there you go. There's project number 2. Project number 3, I'm switching gears a little bit here. Project number 3 is about leadership. And you may think, well, I am not the leader. I work for someone else. I have a leader who tells me what to do. Leadership isn't my responsibility. But according to General Powell, getting the most out of people is about creating a sense of purpose and conditions of trust while displaying moral and physical courage. Well, let's leave the physical courage to one side. That's something he was very much aware of in his business, wearing that uniform. But certainly moral courage is something we occasionally lack when we're doing our planning and when we're building our relationships between ourselves and business, is we're not sometimes prepared to stand up for what we believe in or do the right thing because we take the path of least resistance sometimes. So what am I talking about here with leadership, and how does it apply to all of us? I like to use the term self-empowered leadership. Self-empowered leadership is where each one of us has a leadership role. No matter where your position is in the organization, no matter who or whether anyone even reports to you, you can show leadership to not just your subordinates, but your peers and even your superiors. It is possible. Leadership is about influencing people to do the right things. When you influence others to change their thinking, change their behavior, and you do that in a way that results in positive results, so they're more successful, you've led them, you've demonstrated leadership, and you don't have to be in charge to do that. Imagine sitting next to someone. Your cube is next to someone else. Your office is next to someone else. They're a peer. If they're struggling with something, if they come in to get away from the pressure of what they're working on and they just want to shoot the breeze or vent a little bit, if you can help guide them back on track by reminding them of things like what's important, what our vision is, what our business objectives are this year, if you can help them with maybe some extra skill that you might have, maybe some time to be able to help them in real time, help them with something to get something done. Any of those things that you're doing, you're empowering your coworker, and you're showing some leadership. And they can do the same back for you at some point. We do this for each other. Self-empowered leadership is just taking the initiative to influence, assist, empower our co-workers to be successful, to get their job done. So the word empower is really important here. I use it very, very deliberately. We empower people, and often we think of leaders when we say empowering their subordinates. We're actually sometimes we're thinking, I empower you almost like I give you permission. I approve your proposal. I instruct you that I now need you to do this. I'm empowering you. That's not really the full definition of the word empower. In fact, that's a dangerous situation to be in when your boss says you're empowered, and all they've really done is said, I give you permission to do something. To truly empower someone, you don't just give them permission. You actually give them what they need. That's knowledge, tools, and resources. Yes, you give them some authority, but you also make yourself available to help them through the project. So there's a special little slide I have here which says empowerment comes from access to these valuable resources. You know, and you can empower your coworker just by reminding them of what's important. That's giving them some knowledge, giving them some guidance and advice. You're empowering them when you make available maybe some skills that you have they don't have. They're struggling with some task. They don't have the skill to do something. You help them out. Maybe there's some special tools that you have they don't have. You know, whether it's some account online or some place to go get some data, and they don't have the access to that. It's tough sometimes to give budget away. I do appreciate that's tough to give away budget, and you might not have budget. And this is the one area of the whole of my talk about leadership where it's probably easier to make available budget if you are in a position of authority, if you do have control of a budget. But you know how things work in your organization. You know the way the politics works is sometimes you can charge some items to one budget or another, and you make a decision accordingly, and you can justify both. Which one do you choose? So, you know, if you've got spare budget and you're towards the end of the year and somebody needs something and they don't have a budget, you can always say, let me see what we can do to work through this. So it is sometimes possible. Certainly, if you've got access to a team of people with special knowledge and skills and tools, and you could make those available. I'm not talking about giving away people and reorganizing your department structure. I'm just talking about people helping each other. Time, as I said, is the most valuable resource. If you're able to help someone by having time available to do some of the things we've just talked about, that's how you empower someone. And if you are the boss and you're empowering one of your subordinates, you've got to make sure they have all of the things in this list, plus your time and your knowledge and skills when they come up against roadblocks. So as a leader, it's your job to remove obstacles that are in the way of your subordinates. Often that can mean communication and relationship building with a peer of yours who's superior to your subordinates. Asking your guys to go and talk to the head of the such and such department and get their cooperation on rolling out a testing program for the new XYZ system, that person might not be so cooperative when it's your subordinate going to them. But if you can go along and speak as an equal and help get the commitment and buy-in, you've empowered your team with your contribution. That's what we mean by empowerment. Empowerment isn't waving a magic wand and saying, ding, I give you permission to do this, you have my authority or you have my support. Those are words. You've got to give them the resources they need to get the job done. So that's when you're the designated leader. But we can still empower each other when we're peers or when we're even subordinate to someone else by doing these things or most of these things. And that's showing self-empowered leadership. It's doing the right thing. We can all be self-empowered leaders. And in fact, when you read Colin Powell's book, he's written a book about his approach to leadership after his experiences, not just in the military, but also as Secretary of State. And he says when it all comes down and the stuff is hitting the fan, organization charts and fancy titles count for next to nothing. We look to each other to get the job done, and it doesn't matter what your title is or what your rank is or where your standing is in the organization. You do the right thing. That's how mature we are in business today and even in the military. Years gone by, just a couple of generations ago, everything was done by command and control, and you didn't do anything unless you were ordered to do it. It's not the case now. More mature military organizations in the advanced world encourage people at all ranks to do the right things. And that's what we're talking about here, self-empowering, owning up to the fact that you have experience that can be valuable to your co-workers. So project number 3 is be more, promote self-empowered leadership. That's do it yourself and encourage others to do the same. You can read tons of books on leadership. If you go into a bookstore or even if you ever go to the library these days, you'll see in the business section, leadership is probably the biggest, most popular section in business, non-fiction. There's tons of books. Really, they mostly come down to talking about character and how we want our leaders to demonstrate good attitude and good behaviors. It's less about knowledge and skills other than the ability to communicate, which is an important skill for a leader. Most of the time we talk about character. You know, are they an authentic person with integrity? That means, do they tell the truth? Are they transparent? Are they honest and trustworthy? Are they someone you can look up to and have confidence in? And it's not just because of what they say, it's because of the way they behave. So you can read lots of stuff on leadership, but I'm urging you to not just think of the time when you become designated as the leader. The designated leader, as opposed to the self-empowered leader, is the person who was promoted or appointed or hired into a leadership role, and we have a definite expectation they will do these things. But a self-empowered leader maybe the part-time assistant temporary service desk analyst who's just doing the right things and influencing his or her co-workers by the empowerment attributes we just described on this page here. So please think about stepping forward a little more. You don't have to be the world's greatest leader to demonstrate some of the qualities of leadership, but certainly you can make a difference in helping your co-workers and encourage them to do the same. Okay, so that's project number 3. Project number 4 is all about measuring and reporting. And here's a gentleman, Douglas Hubbard, who told us that if measurement matters at all, whoops, what happened to my slides there? Let's bring this back. If measurement matters at all, I'm not going to read the whole quote, just this first sentence. If measurement matters at all, it's because it must have some conceivable effect on decisions and behavior. So we're going to look at the next project in a few minutes, and it's going to be a follow-on from this one. So what do we do with the knowledge of the relevant measurements and reports that we're going to generate for ourselves? Is we have the opportunity, as I said at the beginning, to track and measure all kinds of things. But the things that make the most difference, as Mr. Hubbard says, are those that allow us, affect our ability to make new decisions and alter behavior, change behavior. So when we look at our management reports that we get on daily, weekly, monthly, whatever cycle of time, when we look at those reports, are we looking at them just out of curiosity because we want to see that, what's actually happening, what performance are we running at, what kind of throughput is going on, what status are we at? Or are we looking for the opportunity to, number one, identify out-of-order situations that need some intervention? Or number two, spot a trend which might develop into a very positive opportunity? Those are the two different things at either end of the kind of performance scale. If something is an out-of-order situation and our report shows it as being such, then we have to make a decision and do something about it. That's the behavior reference. If we see something as a trend, which is encouraging or positive, possibly unexpected, possibly it's expected, what are we now going to do with this? Does that mean we put even more effort behind whatever it is? Or is there something else that needs to be triggered to be done to exploit this new positive trend? So measurements and reports are only of use to us if we're going to not just look at them, but be prepared to make decisions and change behavior. Mr. Hubbard says if we can't identify a decision that could be affected by a measurement and how it could change decisions, then it simply doesn't really have any value. There's not really a lot of point. And, you've got to be honest. Come on, join me in being honest here. There's tons of things that you are looking at on a daily, weekly, monthly basis in various reports, which are kind of like interesting, maybe, or maybe not interesting. They're kind of nice to know, but how much value are they really adding? You might say, well, what's the harm? Well, the harm is we're using up resources in gathering this information. It becomes a distraction. How many meetings do we go into where we sit around and talk about this figure, this report, this fact, but then we don't do anything about it because there doesn't seem to be a need, but we're kind of curious about why this has happened, or we're patting ourselves on the back that we're achieving what we set out to do. If we're not about to make a decision or change behavior, then really the measurement has less value. Not necessarily no value, but less value. That's what I'm encouraging you to think about. So, project number 4, review the various reports. I'm saying your team, whether it's just you or your team, and start asking this question: why do we look at this? What does it do for us? how does it really drive improvements? What do we do to drive improvements or to act upon this information? If measurements are published and distributed, do you know that people are acting upon it? Maybe you're in a role where you're the source of some of this stuff. And over the years, I've heard people describe to me clever little techniques. I'm not necessarily advocating these specifically, but clever little techniques for, stopping the distribution of certain reports you suspect are not really of great value. And then seeing that actually nobody squeals. Nobody asks, where's this gone? And maybe that's a big clue that nobody was looking at it in the first place. I mean, I used to tell a story years ago when I had a real job as an IT manager, because I don't have a real job right now. Not a real job compared to the job you have, working as an IT manager. But when I did that job, I used to get criticized. Me and my team used to get criticized a lot because of the tight deadlines we had for distributing a whole series of weekly reports. My last real job was in the manufacturing world, and I ran an IT department in a factory, or supporting a factory, a manufacturing plant. And we had a very advanced, at that time, manufacturing resource planning system, which required a lot of reports to be distributed in a very timely fashion, instructing the various machine operators, what to do, what stuff to make, how much to make, and what colors and what sizes, and et cetera, et cetera. And we used to distribute these reports every morning, and we generate them overnight in a centralized print facility. But we always were stretched. We didn't quite have enough capacity to get everything done on time. And it was always kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul in the morning. Whose reports were we going to print first and have that guy get them on time, whereas this other guy would get them late? And one guy was a regular complainer. And I remember being in his office early one morning to talk about something, forget what. And one of my team came in with a big cart full of boxes and boxes of paper reports that this gentleman needed for his team. And he looked at me, and guy's name was Bill, and he looked at me and said, see what I mean? We should have had this like an hour ago. My guys are on extended, breaks waiting for these reports to tell us what to make, how to set the machines up and how to get going for the day. And this is just, and he just rolled his eyes and kind of shrugged his shoulders. He'd almost given up. And as he was talking, he went over to the huge big cart full of reports, rummaged around as he was ranting to me, and tore off a few sheets of paper here and there. And I said, what are those pages for? He said, these are the pages we really need to get the machines going. And I quickly said to him, you mean you only need those pages? He said, yeah, the rest of this detail is only something we look at when there's an out of order situation. But the summary pages at the end of every major report is what really drives the engine here. Well, it didn't take very long for me to run back to my team and we get into a huddle and we start talking about this. And that's when we found out that we could schedule reports to generate the stuff the guys really needed very quickly, and maybe only print this other stuff on request. And so until you get out there and see how your reports are actually used and how people work with them during the day, it's sometimes possible that you're quite surprised that things you think are important and valuable actually aren't after all. Now, this project I'm talking about here is not directly relative to the little example I gave you, but I'm talking about your team and the reports your team uses. What do you look at on a daily, weekly, hourly, monthly business cycle? How do you know that they're driving value by triggering decisions and actions? Get some people together, maybe tomorrow morning or Monday morning, and do an inventory of these reports and challenge yourself to question the value. And if you do that, you might find not only do you save a little bit of paper or a little bit of cycles of processing for some reports that don't need to be generated, but what you'll more importantly find is that you're not providing distractions to people and you're getting them to focus on the elements of reports and metrics that really are worthwhile. So as Mr. Hubbard said, look at the metrics and the reports that trigger decisions and behaviors or actions. So that's project number 4. Project number 5 begins with Dr. Deming telling us that, you don't have to do anything about any of this stuff, especially the last project 4 that I talked about. You don't have to do anything because, you know what? You don't have to survive. Okay, it's a cutesy little quote, but we know what he's getting at here is we can stay with the inertia, we can stay as we are, being complacent and just carrying on as normal, because one day, somebody else will decide or somebody else will come up with a different way of working, which makes our survival as an entity or as a group or as a function, as a role, not required anymore, it'll not be mandatory. So what is it we can do to continually improve? And that's my project number 5. To really truly embrace continual improvement. Well, maybe if you do that validation of those reports we just talked about, maybe what you could do is schedule a regular, let's just call it, I'm just going to give you an example. Let's say we have a Monday morning meeting. Maybe Monday's a busy time of the week, so you make it Tuesday. I don't care. But you schedule a meeting with your co-workers, the people who are responsible for various parts of your infrastructure and services. It doesn't have to be something that involves anyone beyond your team for now, but your team, the people that you work with, and go through those reports and look for opportunities for improvement. Remember I said you're looking for 2 things, out of order situations and opportunities to capitalize on positive indicators, positive trends. So make this formal. Get together. Look at those reports. Look at the incidents that may have happened in the last week. Look at the performance statistics. Look at the communications you get from business units and look for opportunities to make adjustments, either to fix something or to capitalize on something, a positive trend. The way you take that forward is you don't just say, look at this, why don't we do more of that? And everyone nod their head and then we move on to the next item. You've actually got to make it real and come up with an execution plan. If you remember, Bill Gates, when he was at Microsoft, said that they weren't the greatest innovators in the world, but they really knew how to execute. So taking ideas that might already exist out there in the business world, but bringing them to market quicker, executing quicker, being decisive. And that was the point I was making right in my introduction about one of the issues I see is we waste too much time. We sit on information. We look at those reports and we think, we'll keep an eye on this. We'll look at it again next week and see if the trend is still proceeding this way. Instead of acting, we procrastinate and we look for the extra piece of information that confirms our thinking. No, be prepared to make decisions and take action. So what you have to do is give a task to someone, confirm they've accepted ownership, set some expectation for what should happen next, especially relating to date or time stamp or a milestone. So, okay, we've decided that by next week, when we get back here, you will have done this and we will have eliminated that out of the situation, or we will have addressed that opportunity to improve. So please take this opportunity to embrace continual improvement. Make sure that when we're looking at our reports, we're not just nodding sagely to each other, and talking around things. We're actually pulling out facts and making decisions. And heck, even be prepared to take a few risks. Think about what the risk is of not doing something, not just the risk of taking action. So instead of waiting for that final piece of information, which will confirm 100% your thinking and your conclusion, be prepared to stick your neck out even a little bit prematurely and say, let's go ahead. The indicators tell us this. What's the risk of going ahead with this course of action? Give it to someone, give them some ownership, tell them we expect to see this result or this action taken within this period of time, and then move on to the next item. So those are my 5 projects. The last one is the only one really that involves you to involve others. Heck, you can sit in your own little continual improvement meeting on Monday morning without anyone else if you really want to, but everyone works somehow as part of a team. So whether they're your subordinates or your co-workers, socialize this idea and try to get everyone to buy into the idea of, for half an hour a week, let's look at our performance over the past week and what can we do to make it better in the coming week. So for you personally, starting tomorrow, in fact, it's not even 1 o'clock Eastern time today. You've still got a few hours today if you want to get a head start on this. Some of this stuff is not that difficult to do. Verify your purpose and how it relates to the business. Find out what your business objectives are this year. In fact, you might be in a period of time right now, as we are at Pink HQ, where we're not only thinking about how our business objectives are going to be realized this year, we're already starting to write down what our plans are for next year. But let's just stick with the current year. Find out your business objectives, even for this year. There's still 3 months to go. What is the business trying to do? Or what within IT service management can you do to help the business, to enable the business and to support it as it moves forward? Then make sure you take that knowledge, project number 2, and focus on the right things. The activities that you're working on right now, make sure they are the right things. You can start this tomorrow. Find your objectives and start to double check and verify against your activities, the way you're set up, the responsibilities people have, and the objectives your team has. Your objectives obviously should be in alignment with the business. Sometimes they can be far removed in terms of what we do affects another team, another department, that affects a division, that affects the business results. I understand it's a bit of a cascade effect, but you should be able to trace this through. Something you do that can save money or can help generate revenue or speed up the income of funds, those are supporting business objectives. Anything you can do in IT to help grow the number of customers you have, to help deploy a new product or a new strategy quicker, you're enabling business objectives. So think about your projects that you have on the go right now and how they can support and enable the business. Then when we get to just more of a behavior for you and your co-workers, we're talking about being self-empowered as leaders. You can start doing this again right away, first thing tomorrow morning. Understand that empowerment is something that is more than just giving permission. It's providing access to resources, and some of that resource is just knowledge, information, guidance, suggestions. Even just being a listener, sometimes you empower someone by helping them to sort through the problem they're trying to deal with. So make yourself available to your co-workers. You'll be empowering them and you'll be demonstrating leadership. Encourage your co-workers to do the same. So again, we're all the way down to project number 3, and we can be starting to do all of these right now before the end of today, never mind tomorrow. 3 and 4 are going to need a little bit more time. Inventory, the various metrics, measurements, and how they're translated into reports for you and your team. Double check that they really are of value. Then start to talk about how do we use this to drive decisions and change behavior. I've suggested project number 5, set up a continual improvement action group. Maybe meet once a week. I don't know, you decide, once a week, once a day, once a month, whatever. That's project number 5. And you can start both projects 4 and 5 tomorrow and start and be fully deployed by sometime early next week for sure. Last thing I'm asking you to do, which is not something I've mentioned so far, is I've encouraged people over the last few years to socialize their new knowledge and hopefully also some success that you've had with the new knowledge. So, you know, we all have access. Right now we're connected via the web. We have access to whether it's blogs or other social media type tools, LinkedIn, Twitter, etc. You know, talk about what you've learned, what progress you've made, how successful it's been, etc. I'd love to hear from you, and I know everyone else would too. That's really my subject for today, the 5 ITSM projects you can get started with tomorrow. We're not quite at our 60-minute deadline time right now, but I don't think you'll mind that. It's a little bit of a slightly shorter session than what we promised you, but we've covered everything. And if you've got any comments or any questions at all, that's how you can reach me. That's my email address. You've got a blog there. You've got my Twitter accounts. You can find me on LinkedIn. It's easy to find me. I'd love to hear from you. And so Renee's asking me, can these slides be sent to attendees? I'll find out whether we can send them to you. I'm not sure if we have all of your contact details, but certainly what I always like to do, Renee, is I will put a copy of these on my blog and I'll tweet it and announce it on LinkedIn. So as long as you're keeping an eye on my social media tools here, you'll be able to get this. And I'll do that within the next few minutes, okay? Andre, thanks for your comment there. We got a nice comment. Thanks for the presentation, and thanks for everybody for sitting in. I don't know if you know, there was about how many 70 or 80 people tuned in today, and virtually everybody stuck around to the end. 1 or 2 people just dropping off now as we're wrapping up. Thanks very much. Hope to see you at a Pink event soon. If not, we'll be doing another webinar. Troy Demoule's up next month with the subject. And you'll be hearing from me soon after that, I'm sure. Have a great afternoon, and tomorrow, good luck with your 5 projects. We'll speak to you next time. Bye-bye.